by trade, and I am here to help teach you WordPress. I wanted to just quickly take a tangent for a brief tick and show you a system on how to run WordPress and build for it locally. It will help if you are new to WordPress, or if you're not new and you're a developer and you're just looking for a bit of an introduction on how to work with WordPress locally versus using in the browser or using SFTP. This one is for you. So this is local. It is arguably one of the best front-end tools out there for using WordPress locally. It does say 100% the #1 local development tool. There are alternatives out there. They're a little bit more techy. You can run WordPress in Docker container. You can run WordPress with XAMPP or MAMP or other sort of tools, but this is very close to just a couple clicks and get going. So in order to kind of get started, WordPress itself is not hard to run, which is kind of why you can run it with a Docker container. But if you want to get started, this will run on Mac, either Intel or Apple Silicon, so the M series chips, M1, M2, M3. Windows, which is kind of what we're seeing on, this is my test machine, or on Linux, which I do have a Linux machine with me as well, but it's a little bit sort of different, so we will just be running it with Windows, and you would just click Windows, fill out your name here and your email address, your organization type. You only need to fill these 3 boxes out. You can leave this blank, and then click Get It Now. It'll pop in for a download up here, and then you can click to install it. And then once you're installed, you'll be presented with a couple sort of click-through pages, and then you'll be looking at this, which is local. Now, I've got dark mode on because dark mode's superior. But if we look at what options you have out of the box, it's pretty streamlined, and there are a couple of add-ons, but we will go through the basic sort of run-through. So if you want to follow this course and kind of have a muck around with WordPress, I would just start with clicking the Create a New Site button right out the gate. And just click Create a New Site. There is a blueprint button, and we will make a blueprint later on in local. It's kind of a sort of an advanced sort of tooling, setting up local as a development environment for developers. But for the new folks in the room, or if you are looking at sort of just getting to know WordPress, just click Add a New Site. And then down on the right here, beside my face, I'll just move my face out of the camera. There we go. So on the right here, there's a Continue button. If we click here, click Continue. And then we're just going to call our site sample testing site, or name it whatever you'd like. Advanced options, you can click the site domain or the local site path. You can change all these, you don't really need to. And we click continue. By default, I would recommend clicking preferred. As you are sort of using local as a debugging tool, you would want to use okay, 1, 2, 3. By default, choosing your environment, I would recommend preferred. You can go custom, and if you're using this to sort of debug older websites, or use sort of updating versions of PHP or testing for newer versions of WordPress, I would definitely pick a custom version here. But for default, I'll click preferred, and then click continue on the bottom right where my face is blocking it. And then you want to set up WordPress. These credentials, if you forget them, I will teach you how to reset them in a later video. But for now, we will just name your username and then select a password. You can change this to whatever you like. This is just a more test email sending functionality. So if you wanted to, you can put in your actual email address here, or you can leave it as default. Now this toggle, is this a WordPress multi-site? We are going to actually run through what a multi-site is. They aren't very common in sort of the introductory sort of phases of WordPress, but if you are inheriting a site and it is a multi-site, we will get into the structure of multi-sites, what they are and all that in a later sort of episode. It is quite dense and it is sort of different to normal WordPress, and I would really sort of want to focus on the foundational parts of WordPress first before we gravitate into multi-sites. All right, then we click on the bottom right, there's an add site button. Click it, and you'll get this pop up. Now, depending on the area, depending on what you're running, you will get a pop up that needs to access your host file on your machine. Click allow, and then once that goes through, click allow again for Nginx, and you did notice a pop up here for me I had host redirection, which is this one here. If I click that, I've already given it permissions. So that's what those allow buttons are. What that is allowing WordPress to run in a test domain, so .local, within your machine's environment. It isn't malicious. Sometimes some anti-viruses can block it. It is definitely not bad. Local has been around for a number of years, and there are other ways to run local, which I'll get to in a later part of the video, and I'll show you that shortly. But by default, it's just trying to help you set up an SSL certificate, the actual site domain, and running the web server locally. It's not bad. It's all a part of how local works. If you did click no, you will have to go through and re-prompt it again to click yes. But realistically, if you're clicking yes and following along with the video, you should be good. Now, it might take a couple minutes to get set up. While it does do that, I do want to come through and pop through. There we go. Pop through and kind of do a brief sort of NitroPack is a speed tool sort of plugin for WordPress. As you see, the pricing is pretty competitive in terms of what it can offer, but if you want to sort of know how it works under the hood, it is a speed performance based tool. It does image optimization, it does code optimization, it does lazy loading for your code. It helps convert your images into WebP format, which is generally the most SEO friendly image format. It might not be the highest resolution, but if you are looking at sort of ticking a lot of core web vitals boxes, then WebP is the format you want to go for. There are also a couple extra sort of features built in. It does have a built-in CDN system, as well as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript minification and compression. Now, WordPress is built off those 4 languages, so HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and PHP as well. But it doesn't do PHP minification, because that's probably important, because that would affect WordPress as a whole. But the sort of pages and templates that we are running and calling within WordPress are built on these 3 languages. So that's kind of handy, which is great. Some of your web hosts too also might offer a CDN via something like Fastly or Cloudflare. NitroPack does have a pretty competitive global CDN and does touch a few regions as well. So it doesn't really matter. If you are going to go all in with NitroPack, you can use their CDN. Otherwise, you're welcome to stay with something like Cloudflare. The free plan is generous in terms of testing, which is pretty good. I run a business plan on a couple client websites, and I definitely want to sort of give it a go and recommend it if you are looking to use a plugin that is just kind of help make your site run faster, especially if you are wanting to improve the end user experience. Definitely give NitroPack a look. Now we're done. We're going to hop back to our sample testing site. Now, with local, you've got a couple options with this to sort of configure and muck around with. You've got your web server, swap around. By default, you run Nginx. These days, most web servers do run Nginx. I would only ever swap to Apache if you are running off an older VPS or an older server that is LAMP based and doesn't run Nginx in any way. Most servers these days do, or most managed hosting providers these days should run a mix of a LAMP stack, which is Linux, Nginx, MySQL, PHP, which is what WordPress runs on. So Nginx out of the box is fine. If you are using this as a sort of code testing tool and PHP testing tool, you can adjust your PHP version here. For me, I have mine set to 8.1. I'm actually right now currently using 8.2. So in the future, on my dev machine, I do have that set up as 8.2 and 8.3. But most hosting providers are using some form of 8.0 or 8.2. So any of these is really fine. If you are testing for older versions of PHP, you've got 7.3 and 7.4 here as well, which is nice. And then finally, your WordPress versions. By default, you will run the most latest version. You can backtrack within WordPress. It's a little bit locked, and I can show you that later if you are interested in sort of seeing how to do testing with local. I'm doing a video on that later on. But by default, you'll run 7.5.2, which is the same version that I showed in the story box of the playground that I showed in the first video. A handy toggle is to turn on one-click admin. That way you don't prop up the WP admin login and have to remember your login every time. But if I click on view admin, it'll take me back to my browser and opens up my WordPress site. And you can see this looks pretty similar to the site that I showed you in the first video. That's because it is WordPress. Runs the same. It does run the 2024 theme out of the box. I made a typo on the first video. That was 2023. Sorry, this is 2024. This is the newest theme. I don't use the default themes a lot, in case you haven't noticed. I generally make my own or use different ones, but these are all both block based. They're all pretty nice and fancy. The full site editor works on both of them, so that's fine. But if we are looking at appearance, our pages, posts, all our standard sort of buttons, toggles, and pages directories are here from the first video because it's called WordPress. There's nothing that's been changed or adjusted out of the box. It is just a handy dandy tool that will help you learn to use WordPress better locally. Now that we're all set up locally, there are a couple little things you can do. So if you are a WP Engine or a Flywheel customer, you can actually push and pull with the local connect system. You just connect to WP Engine or Flywheel, put in your credentials, it'll do a handshake, and then you're done. I have a WP Engine plan myself, so I have access to pushing and pulling with WP Engine. I'm not going to showcase that because I'm trying to make the course as universally appealing as possible. So what I am going to show you how to do later in the video when we later in the series, when we do development with building a WordPress website, I will instead show you how to use a migration plugin with local. And then you've got your blueprints. There are none out of the box, which is fine. You don't really need to use blueprints for now, but I can show you how to use that later in the series. And then you've got your add-ons. So a couple of these are quite handy. It depends on how you want to go. This top one here is an image optimizer, which is handy for image optimization. It does what it says on the tin. Link checker is handy. It helps for broken links, which I do use a fair bit. Instant reload. This is quite handy. This is kind of similar to what we see in the JavaScript and Node.js world, where you are sort of wanting to live reload a page once you make a code or a feature change. That is quite handy. And then you've got the Atlas headless add-on. I will cover headless WordPress in detail later down the line, and we will make great use of this add-on. For now, it's not really needed to be touched, but it does give you the ability to kind of adjust and add to headless WordPress and run it all locally. You can see our blueprints. We actually get a couple blueprints out of the box, and we get a WordPress install the same as we did before, but you also get a Node.js install. We'll touch on that a lot more later. But that is local. In a really brief sort of run through, I just wanted to kind of give you a tool to get set up and started with if you want to follow along. But now we're all set up and you should have your local site set up. Please do let me know in the comments if you had any issues with local. If you have any issues with the .local domain, you do have an option. If you click on settings and you can open local's preferences, you can actually swap to what we call the under our appearance under advanced, we can use localhost, which doesn't support HTTPS, so no SSL, but is less prone to conflict issues, which can happen with the site domains. So on my Linux machines, I actually run localhost, but on Windows, I've been running site domains. So it's up to you. If you are running into issues, I would recommend clicking this toggle and clicking localhost and running localhost, and instead of website.local, you will have localhost colon 3000 or a port number on the end, and that will be where the site runs. So it's a little bit of a subtle difference. It just means you also won't be able to make use of an SSL certificate. But hopefully that's helped get you started with local. Really brief overview. We'll dive through more of it once we dig into WordPress in the later episodes. Thank you for coming along. And if you have any questions, please do pop me an email, send me a tweet, or pop a comment below. Happy to answer any questions you have and help you. And looking forward to seeing you in the later episodes. Thank you very much. Take care. Have a great one.